thank you guys all so much for coming out. Really appreciate it. I am super excited about this particularly because right after we reopened from the pandemic, one of the first people who came in was Rob, and he wanted to check to see if his book was here, and unfortunately it wasn't. But we ordered it, and it ended up becoming our #1 best-selling horror book of the year. Like it beat out Stephen King, so it was pretty impressive.
Wow.
I'm like in, isolated in a back room with a mask on, like, we had signed copies for him. So it's really a pleasure to be able to have him back and do like an event like this. So we're thrilled. And I'm also really excited that Clay is here. Clay wrote my favorite horror novel of last year, Ghost Eaters. So this is like a double whammy. Also, get to give an applause for Rob for being nominated for a Stoker Award. Just making it. I will pass on to you guys. Yeah, thank you all for coming in.
Thank you.
And also you.
Hello.
Hello. How's it going?
Yeah, it's just us. It's just us. Don't mind the 50 people who are staring at us. Hey everybody, my name's Clay. I'm gonna do my damnedest tonight to shine a huge spotlight on Robert because my assumption is we are here to celebrate the release of his new novel, correct? Yes? Yes? Yes. On a Friday night for Sex in the City. You can see Robert and this vile thing that he has created. I feel like there is a little bit of a celebration that has to happen here, and beyond the fact that he is going to grace us with a reading of his book, there's gonna be a little bit of Q&A, and also we have this is actually all being documented, so everything that we say tonight will be on public record.
At a library.
At a library. Yes. Are there any introductions that you'd like to do? Yeah.
Let's doing this out of the basement of the library. Hi, my name is Jessica with Syosset Public Libraries Turn the Page podcast, and my co-host is
Jen. Hello.
And we are here, like I said, from Syosset Public Library. Jen and I are two of, I think, the most prominent co-hosts of Turn the Page, which is Syosset Public Library's podcast, and we are like big horror fans. So we'll be kind of hanging back and letting these guys take the stage, and then Jen and I are going to be asking our own questions. This is also being broadcast on the internet, so we might have some questions from the internet as well, and also obviously from you all. So thank you all for coming.
So it's a jam-packed night, but I think to kind of start us off, I would love, Robert, the book has been out for just a few days now?
A little over 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Oh, well then this is all your old hat.
Oh yeah. Totally.
How long have you been on the road? What is tour been like?
A lot. It's been a lot. This week especially has been a lot. This is my second in-person big event type thing, and yeah, it's a lot. It's fun though. It's fun. It's nice to meet people face to face, and it's nice to get to read in front of people and feed off the energy a little bit. But there's a lot more to come, and it's like we're just getting started kind of thing, and it's exciting and it's fun, and it's my wife is like, "Where are you tonight? What are you doing tonight? What podcast is this?" I'm like, I don't even.
They just set you up, line you up, and you just knock them down.
That's right.
We want to hear the book. We would love for you to read the book, but I would love maybe for you to kind of warn us about the book. Is there any preface, anything that you would kind of suggest to someone before you kind of dive in?
Sure. Yeah. So I do end the acknowledgements with, for all expectant mothers, you may want to sit this one out. It does get pretty rough at points. Those who've read it have been like, "You're a man, you've never been pregnant, and yet You seem to get it. So it's like, okay, cool. But yeah, it's a particularly rough read if you are an individual child at the moment. There was one reviewer who is pregnant currently, and she's like, I'm gonna have to reread it later because it was a lot right now. And I was like, all right, I'm sorry, but she gave it a.
I think you just sold it more.
That was your Rosemary's
But this
Baby.
is I guess we've been warned. So if this is the kind of speak now or forever hold your peace moment for those who are expecting, what to expect when you're expecting the vile thing we created. Are you ready to read? Do you want to? Are you good for it?
I can read.
You want to dive into it?
Can I borrow your copy? That's the one thing I don't have.
Yes.
It's my own.
That's why I brought
copy.
it here.
Thank you. Thank you. Just look at you. You're right at the top.
Oh, you did that on purpose.
Maybe. All right. So this is the prologue. The time before, Lola sat in a chair. There was nothing special about the chair other than that it was yellow, metal, and old. She stared, and her mind raced, curious if she was older than the chair or if the chair was, in fact, older than her. She wore white, a delicate ensemble, soft pants, and a slim-fitting t-shirt. Hi, Lola, Ian said, sitting across from her, emerging as if from a fog. He was handsome, 20s, kind, pale blue eyes. Hello, baby, she said, smiling. Her face was numb. Her entire body was numb, as though her movements and feelings were telegraphed from some deeper, darker place, and her body was following impulses issued forth eons ago. They were alone in the room. The walls were cream-colored. The bed was adorned with a green blanket, white pillow, and yellow comforter, colors that made Lola's skin crawl. How are they treating you in here? Ian asked, placing his hand on her knee. She's out of it most of the time, another voice said from behind Ian. The form took shape in the fog. Lola's father, Moses, tall, powerful looking. He placed a hand on Ian's shoulder. She'll be all right soon enough. Where am I? Lola asked, her voice airy, distant, and not altogether her own. You're at the Apple Valley Psychiatric Center. Do you remember why you're here? Moses asked, his voice low and measured. Lola nodded absently. Memories of a needle piercing into her body going numb, the humming sound of a tube being inserted into her. Walking out of the building, a woman robed in black, kneeling by the highway with a sign reading, is this a choice or a child, with a blurry image of a shapeless form somewhat resembling a baby on a tray, covered in blood and viscous fluid. The image made Lola's skin crawl. In her mind's eye, she swore the fetus on the tray twitched. Visiting hours are just about over, another voice said. Ian stood, leaned down, and kissed Lola's cheek. Lola could see an orderly over Ian's shoulder standing in the doorway. I love you, Lola. Darkness in the room, moonlight beyond barred windows, a cold metal chair, a poorly decorated room, images of a bloody glob of meat twitching on a silver tray beside surgical equipment. Is this a choice or a child? Syringes filled with liquid, injections and struggling, the taste of copper in her mouth as she broke the flesh of a young, muscular orderly, her hair becoming unkempt, the smell of her own skin and sweat, shoes without laces, nights without much sleep, shadows dancing on the walls as those same walls seemed to inch in slowly, the air in the room growing stale, more syringes, less fighting, giving up, a bed that felt more like a coffin, darkness, deep and lonely darkness. If Lola could, she would scream.
Are we still talking to Robert after that? Are we still friends, family? I do feel like I would love a kind of introduction in terms of like if you had to boil down like what is the book about? If you had to kind of like pitch it to those who are now how do you lure us in?
Well, it's the feel-good story of the year about a young couple who decide to have a child, and that child turns out great. Everything goes well. It's not a horror story at all. It's a loving story of parenthood. No, things go terribly wrong for the young couple in the book. They have the best intentions. They're ready to be parents. They make a mature decision to become parents. It's not like a rush thing. But as prepared as they can be, they're not prepared for what comes next, which gets very dark.
You know, it's funny because I actually was very fortunate to have read an early version of this back when it was before it was even called the vile thing we created. I read it when it was called maladaptation.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
what was the shit there?
My wife thought it was pretentious sounding. She thought maladaptation was pretentious sounding. She's right. Yeah, it wasn't a great title, but I was like, this is what it's called. What I like. Then, you know, I just started thinking about it, and I was like, so yeah.
But I mean, I think you're really kind of tapping into this legacy, and there's this. I mean, maybe it's pregnancy legacy, where you mentioned Rosemary's Baby, and I feel like there is this amazing kind of, if you kind of think of IR11 and like the list is pretty expansive. Like, I mean, you could even go like something like yellow wallpaper.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
the idea of sanity, or kind of the point of view of your protagonist suddenly skewing towards something more psychological, something more, like, this is the reality as we know it, and yet we are veering, and like, is this real? Is this not real? We trust ourselves. And I guess, I'm a dad, and I can kind of look at it from this kind of perspective. But you've really kind of entrenched yourself in a female point of view, and I just want to know, like, if we were to kind of go down the research route, how do you do it? How do you kind of nail that voice and that kind of point of view, and kind of ground it in an emotional context beyond your own?
Sure.
Unless there's something you want to tell us.
No. I talk to a lot of moms that I know, friends of mine who are moms, and talk to a lot of, specifically in this case, the mother is African American. I talked to individuals who are African American and their experience of having children, which is so dramatically different than Caucasian individuals having children. It's alarming. The things that I learned, terrifying. So I did a lot of research, talked to a lot of moms, and I read a lot, like an unbelievable amount about pregnancy. And one of the things that I thought was confusing is, like, you go on like Reddit or you go on any blog or whatever, and you get so much conflicting information. And I was like, well, how does a mom sort that stuff out nowadays? And I was like, well, you know what? Lola's going to struggle with that problem too. So it's kind of where that came from too. But I also, like, a lot of my favorite books have a feminine perspective. Like Tremblay writes the feminine perspective so well. You write the feminine perspective in Go See Them so well. So I learned as much as I can from you guys.
Thank you. I mean, to that extent, like, do you find yourself? Are you kind of outside looking in? Like, where do you kind of ground yourself as the author? Like, where is your kind of like? I don't want to say kind of personal experience, but like that idea of like, where do you find yourself in the book? Like, are you personally invested? Like, is it like this little chapter, this little section is you?
I find myself invested in both of them so much. I try to put myself in Lola's shoes as much as humanly possible. Obviously, biologically, I could never experience that. However, I tried to think as much and think as hard about it as humanly possible. How can your body speak? How does your body feel when it's going through so much change? It has to be horrifying, painful. And so I thought about that, and I thought about how Ian, specifically the husband in the book, would feel powerless to help her if she's having these physical problems, all of these pains. So I put myself in both of them as much as humanly possible.
And you always designed the book to kind of volley between the two?
Yeah. I wanted to switch perspectives as much as humanly possible, because I didn't want to just tell Lola's story, because then it would just be Rosemary's Baby. So I wanted to tell Ian's as well, because the important thing to me was not having it be Rosemary's Baby where she's being gaslit by her husband the whole time, because he's going through it as well. Not like the pregnancy itself, but the horrifying stuff that happens to him just as much as it happens to her. her more so, but he is experiencing things. So I didn't want that to be, just Rosemary's Baby for 2023. So I wanted to do a little more than that.
But if someone out there wants to review it and say this is the 2023 version of Rosemary's Baby,
I'll take
go
it.
to Goodreads, please. We will graciously take your Amazon reviews now.
5 stars. 5 stars.
I mean, how long have you lived with this book? Like, the question that you always get that you never want to answer is where do you get your ideas? Like, where did the idea for the book come from? So I'm going to ask a version of that that kind of sidesteps it while still asking the same question, which is, where did you? Now I can't do it. How long have you lived with this idea, and why? How long did it take for you to kind of exorcise it from yourself?
I think like right around the time all my friends started having kids, because that was sort of when I started feeling like, well, I don't know what I really want. And, I don't have children. We don't have plans to have children, anything like that. So they were all, my friends all, not all of them, but a good portion of them have children. And their kids are cool. Their kids are fun. Their kids are cute. But you also feel that same kind of like distance grow. It's just life changing. And I think I kind of internalized that a lot. It's like, especially during COVID, which is when I started writing this, just feeling very like, I miss my friends, but I know that they're, play dates and stuff like that. So it's like that growing chasm kind of thing. And so right around there is sort of when I started writing it during COVID, but I've been feeling it for a few years before.
This book is great as a contraceptive. If you're on the fence about having kids, maybe pick this one up, and it'll help.
I wish we could put that on the cover. Literary contraceptive.
But you are a teacher.
Yeah.
So this kind of veers a little bit away from the book, but I want to know, like, is there ever that moment of like, oh my Lord, are my students going to read this, and are they going to come into my class, and what are they going to think of, like, or is anyone out there?
One of my teacher friends is here.
Okay.
From work, but no, they're not going to read it. I don't think they. I've had students bring in copies of my stuff before to sign, and I'm always like, pretty sweet. Thank you so much.
They don't get extra credit for this? Like, if
Of
they're
course they do. It's an extra 10 points. I can just 20
if they do a book report,
of course, then it's 100. But no, yeah, my students know that I write for the most part, I think. But no, I don't.
Would you prefer to keep those separate for
sure.
fear, like, because it's when it's the fan, it's the student who comes in and is like, I read everything. They want to, like, you're gonna have a misery on your hands.
Oh God.
But think of the book I can.
Yes. Next notice.
No, yeah, it was very, so like the last time that happened was teaching driver's ed also, and I had a student. It's awesome, I love it. I have a student come in, and he had my second collection, and he was like, I was like, where did you get this? Of course, like, and I stuck it back and put it back in the bag. Just very sweet, but it's like,
Did he pass driver's ed though?
of course.
He was like all over the place. Like, you get extra credit. You made it. So then I guess the big question, what is life like now that, like, for the rest of your life, it will always be Bram Stoker Award nominated Robert Ottone. Like you're gonna be like it. Like, there's a kind of BCAD to your existence now, and it's like whatever happened before the Stoker nomination, and now there's life here, because for those who are horror fans, like this is a very prestigious nod that not many people get to kind of claim, and you get to, it's going to be etched on your headstone. I've already talked to the folks at yep I appreciate they're chiseling it away now. I mean, it takes 3 lines, but no, like, what's life like?
It's exciting, it's fun. I'm thankful. Like, that's the thing that I just feel thankful. I feel honored to be nominated, and I'm just, people have been very sweet. Opportunities have come because of it, which is nice. But yeah, I'm just thinking about the next thing always, and I'm always like thinking forward. I'm like, well, I have these 3 projects, and then after this, I want to do this. And then I realized, like, oh yes, the Stoker Awards are in between all of that, and it's like I'm excited. I have the green light from the wife to wear the suit that I got married in again. I told her I would only wear it for her, but she said you should wear it to the Stoker Awards, so I'm going to. So I'm excited to put that on again, and just have a good time. I just want to have a good time with everybody. I want to celebrate everybody else,
Can you talk about the book that was nominated?
Sure. The book that's nominated is called The Triangle. It is a young adult novel about a neurodiverse teenage girl who's named after my niece Aslan, and it takes place sort of in a dystopian future where the world is flooded, and she goes on an adventure with her father into the Bermuda Triangle, and there are various Lovecraft. Oh, here's a copy now. It's materialized from the ether. Thank you.
It's the opposite of the Bermuda Triangle.
And there's all sorts of cosmic entities lurking in the triangle, waiting for her dad, and her friend Ellis, who goes in with her, who does not want to go. He's terrified, but he goes anyway because he's sick. So that's the triangle, and I'm really proud of it. I love it. I love that I have a character named after my niece, because I adore her, and I'm happy to shine a light a little bit on teenagers who are neurodiverse. I don't feel like there's enough fiction that does that. So,
as someone who kind of writes both YA and for adults, do you find yourself ever torn? Do you ever, is the kind of volley between one and the other kind of how does that work for your creative brain?
Sometimes I think like I'll be writing something for adults and I'm like, this could be YA also, because like there's really no difference between the two per se in my mind. Middle grade and YA and adult, totally different worlds, but in this case, it just felt right for kids. It just felt right for kids, and something like the Bible thing we created, certainly not for children. However, I did write something recently that I was like, and I just turned it in. That was like, this could be YA, but it's not, because it's pretty violent at points. But yeah, so I'm always thinking like, well, who does this work best for? And I just kind of adjust from there. So like I'm writing a middle grade, and I'm loving it. I love the middle grade space. It's so much fun. Yeah. And I love the kids that I'm writing, and I'm just like, it's the best. Like I could write middle grade stuff forever.
You get them while they're young, and
Yeah.
then they will. You basically have your entire catalog of work where they can just grow up with you, reading your work until they're old and gray.
And then my headstone will come into play that you've taken care of.
Yeah.
So that's great.
I'll send them. So then, what's next? What is you mentioned the middle grade novel. Is that the kind of thing on the horizon, or is there something else that you can divulge?
I have on October 27th, I have a new collection coming out called Wrapped in Plastic and Other Sweet Nothings. Thank you.
Really good time.
Thank you. So yeah, that's October 27th, but I just turned in a book. I'm going to talk about it because the guy, one of my besties there in the back, who has sort of inspired it, it's about sort of a fictional folkloric thing that he and I came up with in high school. And then I was thinking about it, and I was like, why don't I actually write this? It's called Curse of the Cob Man, and it's about a small town in upstate New York that is very agricultural based, who worship this deity that may or may not exist. And one Halloween night, something goes wrong. The offering is not offered to this deity, and it turns out that deity is very much real, and a lot of blood ensues. So this is the one that I was like,
So that's the middle grade one.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the one I was like, this could be for kids, but then the publisher was like, can you make it like worse? We'll do it for adults. And I was like, yeah, that's the blood the bodies.
It was amazing when your editor's like, "Can you go further?" That's the kind of note that you want to get
For
so
sure.
That's well, is there anything I'm missing? Is there any? I mean, I know that we're going to be back here in October now because the release date is set. Like we will, we'll save the date. But yeah, I mean, if you haven't yet, Robert's going to give you guys the guilty look until you all pick up the vile thing that we have created. I had to do that. It is available over there, along with a bunch of other of Robert's books.
Can you show them the one that I mailed you? So Clay reads. He reads
Oh my God.
physical copies only. So I had this super shady version printed up and mailed to him. And I don't know what the hell.
It had like a nice little like kick. I was like, oh, this is a family.
Yeah. Show them the blurbs that I made up on the back.
Staggeringly dumb waste of time, says Steve. Who are you and why are you in my home? Really great. It was the last blurb he gave.
That was the
I
last
was about to say that had to be the last one.
So I mailed that to Clay with a picture of what it was in. And I was like, this is not a bundle of Colombian Bam Bam, I promise. So I felt so bad that it printed up so big. It's like a textbook.
I had to bring it just because, well, I want you to sign it.
And it's for Clay Mcleod Chapman's eyes
I
only.
know, it's very, well, here's the thing, when you're blurbing books, like everyone sends PDFs these days, but it's like, it's so, I don't know why I'm going up on this tangent now, but like, it's like, you want to hold on to the thing, you
Yeah.
want to like flip
Yeah.
through it, you want to kind of dog ear it,
Yeah.
you want to make notes. Like these were
Oh,
like
look at that.
these were like the things I was gonna say about your thing.
Oh,
or-
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, the
so-
pre-blurbs?
The pre blurbs.
Oh,
That's
cool.
yeah.
That's awesome.
But it, that's
I hate
I was like, why am I reading?
Buy my book instead.
But yes, if you haven't picked it up yet, I think you're now on the hook. The vile thing we created. Let's give it up for Robert. Thank you. Turn it over to you.
I was remiss. I should have mentioned the lady with the lovely smile and wonderful laugh over there is Melissa. She also works end of this, and she also does some podcasting with this, so she's amazing. Thank you, Melissa. So, how we're going to do this is Jen and I are going to handle questions. We're going to go back and forth, and then we'll go to the audience. So I'm going to be talking to Clay. Jen will be talking to Rob. So since this is Rob's night, and I'm going to be talking to
Jen, do you want to get on the screen now?
about
It's Rob's decision. He's the belle of the ball. So
Okay.
I want to. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So because Rob is the belle of the ball, I'm actually going to turn the virtual mic. We don't have a mic, but it's actually over there. To Jen. To start Rob with a question, and then I will take the question to Clay. These books thematically certain similarities, although they don't cross over 100%. But parenthood and parenting and motherhood is a common connector. So Jen, why don't you take it away first?
Cool. Yeah, I have one question that's just for you, Rob. Hello.
Hello.
And then I'll have one that can really work for both your books, I think, that will make a good segue. So my first question does have to do with the prologue that you just read, because it's really good. And it's a really great, drop you in at a extraordinarily high tension and nightmarish confusion, and that you then get to sort of like my question is that when you're writing a book like this, at what point have you written enough that like it's kind of like maybe a race opening, At what point have you created enough that like where you're gonna put your race in the media,
Yeah.
Like-
So that is actually the last thing that I wrote for the book. And that's all because of the guy who blurbed on the front cover. He kind of suggested, Paul Tremblay kind of suggested doing an opening that was, he was like, punch them in the beginning. punch them in the beginning, and I was like, all right, cool. So I imagine, because I make reference to, in the rest of the book, I make reference to that event. And I was like, I'm just going to show it, or I'm just going to put it out there. So that was the last thing that I wrote, but it just made sense to put it at the beginning. And he was like, okay, good. Yeah. So once he said, okay, good, yeah, I was like, all right, cool, thanks, Paul.
Do you find that you write a lot out of order, or is this sort of something that was unusual for you or new to the process?
Oh, that was definitely new. Yeah, I write in order constantly. Yeah, so this was totally different to do that. But I think if I'm look at something as a whole and I realize it's something else needs a little bit more here or there, it just makes sense. But putting something totally new at the beginning was like kind of a shock, because it originally opens with them, oh, we're waking up and she's baking and blah 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 blah, and it's kind of cutesy. But then I was like, no, let's get ugly early.
Love that. All right, so this is a question, I guess, that is the segue, because I think it does apply a little bit. But I'm very interested in how writers craft slow burns, and what are the different strategies for drawing out tension in a way that, like, it's never slack, but it's never too taut. Like, how do you keep it so that the reader is invested and dragged along, but that you're not giving them too much too quickly, if that makes sense?
Want to take that?
I mean, I personally like to delay as much as possible, to kind of withhold, and then it's just a matter of kind of what is the breadcrumb trail that you leave, and if there's one kind of enticing detail or one kind of clue, it's a little problematic, but I like to perturb the reader a little bit. You have to kind of like frustrate them to be like, well, what does that mean? What just happened? Like, I don't get that. I don't understand. Like you have to kind of like compel them to go to the next chapter. And sometimes the best way to do that is to confound them in a way of like, what? Like things shouldn't make sense, but they should push you forward. And it's just that kind of propulsion that it's difficult, and it's I think it's in the writing process, for me, it tends to be, you write too much and then you kind of whittle it down. It's like you pare it down or kind of sculpt it, until it becomes the kind of just the right amount, to then get into the next chapter, which has a little bit more, and it escalates, and it escalates, and it escalates.
And then when that payoff happens, those little breadcrumbs are so much fun, because it's like, remember I did this back in. Yeah, I love that too. That's always when I get excited.
To the extent that you don't want your reader to know that those breadcrumbs were there from the get-go. It's almost like they have to read the book again.
Do I have
Be
a
like,
book?
it was always there. Like, Bruce Willis was dead the whole time. Oh.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I like that. I like it when I really like it when my horror just kind of hits me the whole time. By the way, it's like the call is coming from inside the house, all of that. But so play. So you wrote Ghost Eaters, which was amazing, and we've spoken about that when it came out with those cookies. That was fun. But your book that's coming out now, what is it called again?
It's called What Kind of Mother?
Yes. So we have, as with Rob's book, we have a book about parental anxiety. In a nutshell, how would you describe what kind of mother?
I don't know yet, to be honest.
Okay.
I have until September to kind of
Sure.
soundbite this, so this is absolutely nearly no.
I mean, you go first. I can tell you. Go
Could you
first.
tell me? No. This is very important, because, like, honestly, I feel as if I'm the last person to know what the book is about. So if I was someone who came up to you and was like, hey, it was the last thing you read, and you're like, oh, I just read this book, What Kind of Mother? And I was like, what was that about?
Okay, so first of all, I have to say, I recently attended a virtual program for Penguin Random House, and they talked about your book.
Oh, nice.
But like, it was basically like they said something to the effect of, like, it's like a Nicholas Sparks book gone horribly wrong.
Yes.
It's amazing, because I mean, like, if that's your jam, that's your jam. But the horribly wrong Nicholas Sparks book, would be the only way I read a Nicholas Sparks
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
sorry,
I
that's
did
just-
read. I did
I
read
did.
a lot of Nicholas
Yeah.
Sparks.
Did you
I
really?
did. I totally.
It could be a second chance romance book, but what it really is it's a book about a young woman who became a mother at a very young age. And things go horribly wrong, and she's working as I guess sort of like a street level psychic reading palms, trying to figure out like what's going on with her custody of her daughter who's now a teenager. And then the one who got away comes back into her life, and he was just amazing in every way, but he fell in love with a woman who was not from around there, and she was able to console herself by dating someone who then got pregnant, and mayhem ensued. But she's back in her hometown again. This is very Hallmark movie.
Totally.
Yeah.
We want to read this book, right?
She comes back into town, and her beloved high school crush who didn't work out comes back, and she knows that it's been really hard for him because his child disappeared. And he comes and he says, "Can you use your psychic powers to help me find my son?" And mayhem ensues
Mayhem.
because
Yeah, maybe that's the
Yes.
that's the like
because
that's the spoiler territory.
that's the
That's
spoiler
the-
territory because things are not as they seem. And this is not a second chance romance book in the way that you're thinking if that's what you like. Cool, but mayhem ensues. So warning. Yes.
That's a question. It's almost like a follow-up to my last question. I
Yeah.
think you both could do that. I'm really interested in what you said before about how part of how you keep the reader on the hook is confounding expectations. I wonder for both of you, does that mean, and I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm painting it in a sadistic way, but like, do you find yourself as part of your writing process trying to anticipate what the reader would expect to happen and then undermining that? Like, is that part of kind of how you write?
I think the sadism definitely plays it. But I think that's because, if you give the reader what they want, they will forget your book pretty quickly. But if you don't give them what they want, but they find that they like that better, then you kind of, it's this kind of like, it's a bit of a tease and it's a bit of a lure, but it's a trap. And you have to kind of recalibrate their expectations. Yeah.
So oh sorry, did I step on you?
Oh no, were you gonna?
No, I was gonna say, like, I always think of like multiple places where it could go. I try to choose the most ridiculous. Because if it's just like, oh, I want it to be as absurd as possible while also still being, having connective tissue to the story, but I do like to get as weird as possible. We're writing horror.
If you surprise yourself as the writer of the
Yeah.
story, you are almost, you will also surprise the reader because, those kind of epiphanies kind of come very organically. If they come organically, it's not just for the person reading the book; it's for you who's writing it. Wow, that's
And it's exciting.
yeah.
So for you, why motherhood? Why did you want, and I don't want to get into spoiler territory, but why did you decide to join motherhood with somebody who was, I guess, and fatherhood in a hard, from different perspectives?
Well, not to like get into the pop psychology of it all, but like I'm an only child. I was raised by a single mom. A lot of the kind of trials and tribulations of the protagonist and What Kind of Mother are in effect things that my mother went through. She wasn't a palm reader or a psychic, but she was a crafts person. She's a potter, and she would travel and just hawk her wares. Go to these craft fairs, art fairs, and I just remember that idea of like kind of putting your work on your back, driving to all these different places, trying to sell as much of your stuff, and then like make more of it. And as a kid, kind of growing up in that environment, I just was kind of, it taught me the kind of understanding of you have a craft, and it is your vocation, and you kind of, that is the thing that you do, you work towards it. And I kind of wanted to emulate that, but as a writer, but I don't know if I can answer that question, but like, for me, motherhood, I always gravitate towards female points of view because I just grew up with women in my life, and not it's crass, but like men were always less interesting to me because they were either not there or they were just jerks. So like I just didn't want to, I would rather write about the single mom kind of struggling through her life. Nobody's perfect, but like, I don't know, like that to me was a compelling story, more compelling story because that's the stories I read.
And a horror story.
And a horror story, yes. My mom has not read it yet, so there's like this I'm like dreading that moment. Yeah, so this is gonna be
With another one?
I do. And then that'll be it.
One more, and then we'll open
Okay,
it up.
yeah, promise.
We have two, so I'll let them know they can start asking.
Okay, well, we'll give 5 minutes. Okay, go ahead.
Something that occurs to me while you're both talking is that stories kind of lets you explore both like internal psychological horror and also social horror, because like parenthood's like a really loaded and charged topic, and people have a lot of really strong feelings about it and how other people do it and how your parents did it and how your kids appreciate you and all that kind of stuff. So what I would love is like when you're writing, were you attentive to how the sort of inner struggles of the characters were either mirrored or shaped by or in communication with like the external horrors, if that makes sense?
I don't particularly want to be a dad. I had the best dad. I could never be as good as him. It'll never happen. So that's kind of where like my decision to not want to be a dad kind of came from. And I kind of just have always kind of felt like, there's pressure on young couples to have kids immediately, squirt out as many kids as humanly possible, do your thing, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, no, like if I had a kid, I couldn't be here. Like we couldn't, I don't know. Well,
they're in the car.
Oh, like we couldn't,
like, be back in town.
They're listening to tunes, like.
But like I couldn't, we couldn't go to see Blink-182 this month. Like we couldn't just take a vacation when we wanted to. We couldn't go and do, and I'd rather do those things, and I just couldn't be as good as my dad. So like I just felt like it's just not for me. At the same time, the couple in there has sort of the same thing. They, in the Wild Thing We Created, they have like this kind of reaction of like, well, we have everything we want. Like we're already perfect. We're not imperfect because we don't have kids. And then once they start seeing the pressures from outside a little bit more in their face, they kind of realize like, oh, well, maybe we're not perfect. And of course, it's that kind of second guessing that leads them down the path that goes perfectly well. Everything's fine. But yeah, no, and that's sort of how they respond to it.
I don't know if I have an answer, but I do know that I'm a bad parent. I mean,
I don't know if I believe.
Well,
You're fun.
I mean, there's the fun dad who makes all the mistakes, and then mom has to clean up the mess. But like, I guess my question to your question is, what is when you're saying the kind of external, like, is that like other people telling you how to be a parent, or?
What I mean, because something that I think that came to light, especially in your book, Rob, is that like it could be really hard to know whether you want kids because there's so many different voices from different parts of your life telling you you should or shouldn't, and so like in that way, like external forces are really shaping like your internal experience of like what you feel about parenthood, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, like, I mean, like, you were mentioning like going online, like when you're expecting, like there's just so much, there's like an echo, like just the din of like, this is what you're supposed to do, and this is how you're supposed to do it. And if you're not doing this, you're wrong. And this is the benchmark at this age, this is the benchmark, like, and it's like, every step of the way, it's almost like a signifier of like what you're failing to do at that point. So I guess to be writing about the kind of fears or the terrors of parenthood, it's actually kind of fun because you get to kind of like relent on that, and maybe, you know, whatever anxieties I feel as a parent are manifesting themselves in these books, because the last four books have all, I've been a dad through the last four books, and you know, at least the last three, if not four, have been all about like crappy parents. Yeah.
You know, before we open it up, you know, I have to say, so I am a mom, and you try being on those forums when you are like out to here with twins, and your feet are
Swollen.
way bigger than they
Yeah.
should be. Your body is big.
My wife has a friend whose foot still hasn't unswollen.
Oh, it's
Okay, one is normal, the other one's still huge.
I
How's
love
that
my
possible?
kids,
It's
but it
horrifying.
is.
Body horror.
It is funny.
Yeah.
But you know what else? Moms groups on the internet. That's hard. Man. But anyway, so my question to you though, and also like, you know, you can go answer it, is setting. How much do you put into the setting of the story? You know, how much does the supporting cast really play into the story? Because they say it takes a village to raise a child. So what kind of village, literally and figuratively, does it take to raise a horror book about parenting?
Well, I will say, I mean, for what kind of mother, all of the characters are kind of fractured families. So there's no one whole unit. Like, so it's, you know, you've got a dad over here, you got a single dad, a single mom, you know, all these, you know, like I think it's like, you know, family has become a very nebulous, like I think that the idea of the nuclear family, like the kind of the biological mother, the biological father, the, like, you know, like that definition, I feel still there, but I feel like it kind of has expanded and embraced.
Down family.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something really telling about, you know, if this biological nuclear, like the kind of traditional family model doesn't exist for these particular characters, maybe there is another version of another kind of family that exists, and maybe that's not your family, maybe it's not the traditional family, but it is our family, and that's the hope with, you know, what is it? You can't pick your family. There's
Yeah.
can't pick your family.
Yeah.
Pick your family's nose.
And it's sort of Lola and Ian in the book are. Lola's mother walked out on them, on her and her brother when she was little, and Ian has never met or known his father. So they both kind of come from fractured families, but they found each other and created their own long before they had a kid. So they're a healthy, perfectly normal family until things go wrong. But yeah, no, I think the idea of found family, because again, you know, Ian has some friends that come into their lives and they become family, and the idea of it takes a village or whatever does come into play. However, the village might not always be the best.
The village of the damned.
Could be, could be a damned village.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I guess we will take some questions from the physical audience. Melissa, see if you want to see us in the virtual audience.
So far, we only have a comment. So
Oh, what's the comment?
shout out to Rob. Bravo.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, folks. What do you got?
Oh, some questions.
One in the back. What horror, like what movies or books, or you got something?
Yeah. Everything, all horror inspires me and gets me excited. But I think specifically with this book, I was really looking at, there's sort of a novella short story called Don't Look Now by Daphne du Maurier. And that was kind of the one that really inspired me the most, and also the movie in a big way, because there's a connection between the two characters in the movie and in the book that's like they're very close and very romantic and very in love while still going through something horrific and still mourning, and then something even worse happens to them. So that was kind of an inspiration on the book, The Vile Thing.
Did you read the book before seeing the movie?
No, I saw
You
the movie before the book.
The movie. God,
Oh my God.
Yeah, that Nicholas Rogue. Still hold on to that.
I watch the trailer all the time. This is my favorite movie trailer of all time. It just killed me.
I know this is being recorded, so your answer is really gonna damn you. But like, if you had to choose between the book or the film, which would you choose?
The film.
Oh, I knew it.
The film.
Me too. Me
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, I love the book, you know, for sure. But the movie.
So y'all should go see
Don't Look Now.
Nicholas Rogue, Donald Sutherland, Julie Christie.
Julie Christie. Yeah. So
The
good.
first honest love scene, like
Yep.
the movie is movie is very known for a lot of things, but like there is a very like kind of, it's not a sex scene per se, it's more of a like you know,
It feels like a real couple.
yeah, a married couple
Yeah.
making love, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I'm gonna steal his answer. He said read Don't Look Now. I'm saying watch Don't Look Now. And that is-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What was the one that inspired you? You want to say?
I mean, God, you know, the first horror book. I mean, like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark,
Oh
Yeah.
hands down. You know, there was also, you know, thank goodness for Scholastic Book Fairs. But like, there was a book called North America's Greatest Monsters, and I read a story about the Wendigo, and that was really profoundly affecting. You know, I saw Halloween far too early. But I'm a big fan. Like when I was growing up, TBS, what you could just come home and watch TBS on TV, and there were movies that pre PG-13. You know, like there's this film called Tourist Trap.
Yeah.
It's an amazing movie because it's utterly
Nuts.
bananas. But it was PG, and it shouldn't be PG. But there's like, at that point, there was nothing to say it couldn't be PG. So TBS would just be like, well, this is permissible.
Sure.
Like, you know, we're just gonna show this on a Saturday afternoon for that 6-year-old at home who's just got, you know, who's watching, and like all of a sudden, like that seared its way into my head. So
It's a great movie.
I just have to comment because I say this constantly. Jen and Melissa know I say this constantly. I honestly think that most, if not all, children's entertainment from my childhood, Jen's childhood, you know, as Bob, we've spoken about this,
Mhm.
70s, 80s, 90s, a lot of it was horror.
Yeah, even 2000s. Yeah.
Yeah, but like you're talking about like things like, and you know, not to, you know, you're talking about things like even like, what was it, the movie version of the Rats of Nim. They have that whole sequence with the rats being injected with that was terrifying.
Yeah.
That was terrifying. That was horror. You cannot tell me that wasn't. So yeah, and the being a film person, and I know Jen knows this as well, the whole PG-13 thing. A lot of the movies that were PG.
1982 was.
100%.
Yeah.
Right? Like that was wasn't it Poltergeist?
Yeah.
no,
Was
that was PG.
Oh, no, it was the one that made it, I think, was Temple of Doom.
Was
They
it?
invented
Yeah.
So
a-
Spielberg.
Because
invented
I know that
PG-13.
the original Ghostbusters is PG, but the second one
That's
is PG-13.
Definitely.
Should not be PG by any means.
Red Dawn was the first.
What was it? Red,
Red
Dawn?
Dawn on
Wolverines.
Here we go.
On
Oh.
August 10th, 1984.
Cool. I was how old was I? Like a couple months old.
There's this amazing intersection of like fantasy film and horror for if you grew up kind of watching in the early 80s. So I'm thinking of like the live action Dark Crystal,
Mhm.
Never Ending Story.
Never-ending Story is 100% horror, and even
Yeah.
more so if you know the story of the author.
Yeah,
That's like
Yeah,
I've
Jojo
never
Rabbit, the real story,
yeah,
without like whimsical
yeah. I mean, like
Taika Waititi.
there are. I mean, like like, you know, Labyrinth.
Yep.
What was the Return to Oz?
Oh my
With-
God,
with,
Yes.
You know, like there's something about like these films that were ostensibly made for children, but they were so dark. They're kind of precursor to Tim Burton, the pre-Tim Burton kind of aesthetic. Like that, like, you know, having Tim Burton before there was even a Tim Burton, like that was like that was really kind of like traumatizing. Like those movies, like yeah. So
Even old school Disney. My mom would take me to the library when I was a kid, and I would always get Alice in Wonderland. It was always like one that I wanted, and just like, oh, off at their heads, painting the rose red. And I was like, what does that mean, Mom? And she's like, they're gonna snip the roses later. Everything's fine. But it was just creepy.
you're guaranteed one scene out of every Disney movie that is going to stick with you and give you nightmares, like Dumbo. Like when they like
Dumbo is horror.
Yeah. They get eaten by a whale. That's horrible.
Yeah.
Like the Meg before the Meg.
there was another hand over there. Yes.
Is it okay to pass too?
Please. No, we're
No.
hanging this out.
The first one's for you, Clay. I have to know. Are you named Clay because your mom's a potter? Because that's
You know, the kids in fifth grade found that out. Yeah.
Really?
that's the answer.
My mom's a potter. She called me Clay. She's like, there's just, that's one interpretation. Are you kidding? Like on the playground every day, like, hey, your mom's a potter, the name is Clay, like Play-Doh, like it was just like
I feel
relentless.
so bad. No, because it's a great.
Trauma.
Now that it's
trauma.
been
My
asked,
favorite
though,
literary
we're-
character.
Now you brought that up. What's your next question?
My second question is, could you recommend, this is actually for everybody, could you recommend lesser known hidden gem authors in horror that you would love for us to discover?
Not to plug, but there is a whole shelf like that table right there, that bookend has some amazing books on it. I'm going to recommend with a huge caveat, Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. It is amazing, but it is not for everybody. So like, you know, use at your own discretion. But that but there's Dark Harvest over
Yeah,
there.
it's no Partridge. Yeah,
Oh.
Partridge. Yeah. it's
Yeah.
really good.
Dark that one, Dark Harvest, like yes.
I'm gonna say, if they have it, because I bought it here. Maybe they don't have it anymore. I don't know. But the Tale of the Tailor and the Three Dead Kings. It is an old, ancient, medieval ghost story, and if you want something very classical and very traditional, it's fantastic. They might have it. I hope they have it. I bought mine here, but I would recommend that. I know it's not like lesser known, like indie person, because it's like I said, it's medieval, but it's terrifying.
But I walking in and just looking at that
Yeah.
end table, it's just kind of like that. Those are all the like great books right over
Yeah.
there. Like new, there's Paul Tremblay's, there's Stephen Graham Jones, there's Grady Hendrix's, but there's a book called The Insatiable Bolt Sisters by Rachel Eve Moulton, and it's an amazing book. It just came out like maybe a couple months ago. It's phenomenal.
I'm gonna throw.
One of them is
Rob.
Yeah.
Because as a librarian, read more obsessively, especially during the pandemic. So one of them is if you are a fan of these children's movies that are actually horror, I recommend The Shadow Glass by Josh Winning. Was it The Shadow Glass? It was
Yes.
The Shadow Glass, which is like it's like a Jim Henson type story about a young man who was the son of Jim Henson type figure who whose father passes and he finds himself in his father's old house with the old puppets and mayhem ensues. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Another one, she's up and coming, but Rachel Harrison writes some really fun horror. Most of it is centered around like the Hudson Valley area, but Cackle was super, super fun.
Such sharp teeth.
Such sharp teeth. And that one also has sort of like a pregnancy, motherhood side to it as well. That was really good. Definitely Rachel Harrison. And I have to pull this up because it's not specifically horror, but it's sort of one of those things that touches on horror for me. I'm a fan of stories about toxic friendships. And there's a book called The Girls Are All So Nice Here by Lori Elizabeth Flynn. And it is the most unsettling book I have ever read. One of the most unsettling books I have ever read in my life. I think about it all the time, and it upsets me very, very much in the best way.
I'll stick with one author who I just finished his book that's coming out in September. But one of my favorite books from last year was The Ghost That Ate Us by Daniel Kraus. And I just finished reading Whale Fall, which is coming out in September, which is, oh my gosh, it's one of the most disturbing things I've ever read. Whale Fall is about, Whale Fall is about a son who was raised by a very accomplished diver. And after his father dies, he goes to do a dive for him. He finds a sperm whale that swallows him, and he has about an hour left of oxygen in his tank, and he has to sort of figure out how to get out of this whale as it is diving. And he also is coming to terms with his father's death and, and his own perhaps imminent death, and lots of stuff going on. So that's great. That one's coming up. The Ghost That Ate Us is a sort of like a fictionalized true crime book about a poltergeist at like a McDonald's style fast food restaurant. And it's a great haunting. And it also is about like the role that social media plays in perhaps encouraging people not to do the best things in their hearts. And so that's like a really good book too. Daniel Kraus is great.
More questions?
You mentioned earlier that you spoke to a lot of pregnant women and the family very well. Was there any one in particular story or, any connotation that they gave you, any words of wisdom, whatever that stuff? I know as women, especially being a mom and pregnant myself, I got inundated, like you said, on the internet, but from other good intentions, of course, but inundated with information when I was pregnant. This is going to happen, maybe, maybe not, be careful. And you have to kind of cipher for a lot of that. When you're writing, was there any one that stuck with you more than anything else? And then now even after writing the book, talking about it.
Yeah. My friend Mikey, she lives upstate. She is a woman of color, and she's the one who kind of clued me in to women of color having a very difficult time, having to advocate for themselves and not being listened to a lot. And that's the thing that kind of stayed with me. So without her kind of like putting me on that path, I never would have learned the things that I learned about that whole world. Terrifying, strange. I don't know why that is, institutional racism, I'm assuming, but yeah, terrifying. And she has 2 wonderful kids. She's done it twice, and so she obviously knows what she's talking about. But yeah, unbelievable. That was the big one for me.
Anyone else?
So after you buy all of those books we talked about, there's another table that's just a little bit over there that has all of our books on it.
That's true.
So maybe you should actually start at that table and then go to the other tables. But let's give it up to Robert.
Barnes and Nobles.
Can you help me shut this down?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.